Hey guys, so I am always on the lookout for interesting places where we see physics and astronomy in movies or video games, and especially checking whether those are realistic in any way. And I had this cool experience with the movie Lightyear, where I actually got to reach out to someone who made the movie and or was involved in making the movie. And so I just want to share that with you because I think it's super cool. So I was watching Lightyear a few months ago with my kids, and even in the first, 15, 20 minutes, I was noticing that they were using language of astronomy and science really accurately, which stood out to me. It was kind of unusual. And then I saw this scene. Buzz is flying towards the sun. He flies around it, and something goes wrong. There's an explosion. I don't want to spoil the movie for you. This is early on. Explosion, and his ship is off course. So watch the scene for just a second. All right, the ship's off course. The computer's like, you're going to miss the rings. What are you going to do? And so Buzz, obviously being a math genius, breaks out some tools. So I'm going to freeze right there. This is actually like if you've ever known a pilot or flown or anything like that. This is actually this old school slide ruler. We used to call it a flight computer. And that is like a totally legit tool that I don't know. When I used to fly small airplanes, I used something just like that. So I think it's super cool that they pulled that out and he uses it. But this is the part. All right, he gets out a little grease pen and he starts drawing and writing. Now, normally when you see people writing math or science on a blackboard in a movie, it's just like gobbledygook. And so I was really amazed that like, whoa, just a second. When they're showing stuff, I'm like, that's actually like legit, some legit physics going on. Now, granted, they're not showing like lots of equations, and none of those equations have to do with gravity per se. But at least they're like drawing realistic things. They're using theta to label the graphs. He's using the Greek letter tau, and he's doing calculations showing this like off. But I'm like, wait a minute, this was actually like a real attempt at making some realistic physics. Now, I would have just let that go. I would have just let that go. However, I'm gonna be honest, I fell asleep watching the movie. Okay. I was tired. But I woke up towards the very end as the credits were going, and something unusual I noticed. I don't typically sit and watch all the credits, but I'm going to take you right to the spot 142:45 at the very end of the credits. Okay. I love this Future Space Rangers. Those are all like the kids that people had. And then special thanks to our friends at NASA. I'm like, oh wow, well that's how they got the accurate science, right? They worked with NASA, and these are actually astronauts. And then I saw this. This is what I wanted to show you. It says Math by Don McLean, and I'm like, what? Math by Don McLean? Like, what movie has a credit that says Math by Don McLean? I'm like, who is this guy? Like, who? How do you get the job to be like the math guy on a Pixar movie? So I'm like, I got to figure this out. So I started doing some Google searches, and I found out that Don McLean is like an engineer sculptor, and there's an interesting connection, which he also is the father of the director and writer of the movie Lightyear. So I was able to find his contact information, and I sent him an email. I'm like, can you tell me the story about like I'm a community college astronomy professor. I'm always excited about like where there's cool physics and astronomy. And I noticed in Lightyear, like, there was an attention to detail. And it said it was math was done by Don McLean. So can you explain like the story of how this, and he emailed me back like the next day. And so this was the email he sent me. And he expressed kind of his gratitude and surprise that I would reach out to him. So he said, such a delight to hear from you and your experience viewing Lightyear. How on earth did you figure out it was me? Which I pride myself in my Googling skills. So that made me feel good. And I asked if he'd be willing to meet. We haven't had a chance to actually connect on Zoom yet. But he said, let me say it was unusual for someone to sit through the credits of a Pixar film. My son Angus worked for Pixar for nearly 25 years, and he pitched the idea for Lightyear nearly 5 years ago. It says here he asked me to do some math and proposed a scenario where a ship was blown off course and had to use another force to get back on. And he asked him to use what I call a grease pen. He calls a China marker to do the calculations on the glass. So he goes on to kind of tell the story. You can pause the video and read this if you want to, but he goes on to tell the story of he wrote like pages and pages. He says 4 sheets of calculations which was too much to actually include in the movie. So he kept getting emails back from his son, like, "Can you make this smaller? Can you make it shorter?" And and ultimately, like he even highlights, it's basically just some Greek letters that they ended up including for a few seconds of the movie. But I think it's really interesting that they made it super accurate. They took this attention to detail. The guy who made it was able to get his dad involved, which I think is super cool. And yeah, I just wanted to share this with you. I just thought it was a great example of not only really cool physics and astronomy in a movie, but also a cool example of like how you can reach out to someone who's like actually working on these movies and have a little interaction with them. So anyway, I want to share that with you guys.